Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first session of a full week of discussion all about life after stroke. I'm Lauren. I'm a member of the Different Strokes team, and I want to start the week by thanking you for being here with us this morning. I'd also like to extend a huge thank you to our sponsors, Bolt, Bird and Kemp, who have made the conference possible. To begin with, let's get some housekeeping out of the way. Hopefully most of us are familiar with Zoom by now, but for those of you who aren't, you can use the chat function at any point for general discussion. To do so, just hover your mouse towards the bottom of your screen and select the chat function. And to test it's working, I'd love to know where you're watching from this morning. So let's have a look. Oh, it's nice to see you chatting already. I'm in Milton Keynes, and I know Austin is in Milton Keynes as well today. Oh, wow, we've got Wigan, Chicago, Aylesbury, all over. Oh, wow, that's amazing. So separate to the chat function is the Q&A function, which again can be located at the bottom of your screen. So if you scroll to the bottom and select Q&A, you can submit any questions that you have throughout the session. Now, we will be doing the Q&A at the end of the session, so please submit your questions using the Q&A function, as we may miss you if you pop it into the chat. The call is being recorded, but please rest assured if you're watching in your pajamas at home with a cup of tea, that you won't be visible. It's only myself now and our speaker, Austin. Now, the session will be made available later on YouTube, so if you do want to watch it back at a later date, we will send an email to everyone in a week or so just to let you know when it's up. So, to the reason we're all here this morning. Today we're going to be talking about raising awareness of younger stroke, and I'm going to pass you on to a man who has been working incredibly hard on this mission in recent years, our lovely CEO, Mr. Austin Willett.
Thank you, Lauren, and welcome everyone. I'm really pleased to see so many people joining this session today. My name is Austin Willett. I'm CEO of Different Strokes, and this is now the third year that we've run these virtual conferences. We started running them in 2020 as a consequence of COVID, when it became apparent that it wouldn't be possible to hold in-person events for obvious reasons. But we've discovered over the last couple of years that we were actually able to reach so many more people by running these sessions remotely than we were if we were to hold in-person events. So that's why we've again decided to go virtual for our conference this year. We've got some fantastic sessions lined up during the course of the week. Sessions will be taking place at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock every day, Monday to Friday. And we've got guest speakers, including Kim Bowler from Michael Page Recruitment, Laura Barlow from Bolt, Bird and Kemp Solicitors, and neuropsychologist Dr. Giles Yates. We've also got a couple of really fantastic stroke survivor panel discussion sessions lined up. One of them looking at fatigue and the other looking at invisible effects of stroke. So I really hope that you're able to join us for as many of these sessions as possible. If you're not though, all the sessions will be being recorded. So if there's some that you're not able to make or miss, then they will be available for you to view on our website within the next week or two. I'd like to start today by just finding a little bit of information about who's watching right now. So I'm just going to launch a couple of polls, and I'd be grateful if you could just answer these. So we've got just two questions, the first one of which relates to if you are a stroke survivor, how old you were when you had a stroke. And the second question, if you can't see it, please do scroll down a little bit. And that's when you first became aware of different strokes and maybe first came into contact with our services. So if you're just able to answer those two questions, I'll give you a minute or so. That would be great. Thank you. I'll just give it another 30 seconds or so. Okay, I think most people have answered now. Last chance if anyone else is able to pop in their response. Okay, thank you very much. So we will end the poll here and let's have a look at the results. So we can see we've got, as we'd expect really, quite a wide age range in terms of when people had a stroke, including one person who had this when they were a child, another as a teenager or a very young adult, and then quite a range of people from 25 upwards, all the way up to 65 plus. So thank you for that. And let's also have a look at when people heard about our services. Well, a few of us heard about pre-stroke, which is always good to hear, but always good to know that people are aware of us. But we've also got a few here a little bit later, 8 heard about it 6 to 12 months, 4, 1 to 3 years post-stroke, 3 more years post-stroke. Obviously, this is something that we want to change because we want as many people as possible to be aware of our services at an earliest possible stage. But thank you for sharing that. It's always fantastic for us to know who's viewing these sessions. Okay, now there are a lot of, I'm just going to share my screen now. As it has a little bit of presentation for you. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that okay, but Lauren, please do let me know if you can't for any reason. But I'd like to start by talking about myths to do with stroke. There's a lot of myths about stroke, and obviously first and foremost for us in the area that we work in is this myth that stroke only happens to the elderly. And by definition, we know this is simply not true. After all, this is why we were set up in the first place. But we still have such a long way to go in this area. And for all the time that younger people are still having strokes, still thinking that they're the only person their age that this has ever happened to, then there'll be lots more work for us to do. Secondly, the myth that stroke only causes physical disabilities. The image of stroke depicted in the mainstream media tends to focus on physical disabilities caused by a stroke. This is, of course, the reality for many stroke survivors who face significant challenges in their daily lives because of the nature of their physical disability. But stroke affects everyone differently. According to my maths, I think there were 36 stroke survivors that just answered our poll. Well, there's no typical template of a stroke survivor, and I'd be certain that those 36 people have all been affected in a different way to each other and in a way that is truly unique to yourself as a stroke survivor. Some survivors are not living with challenges caused by physical disability, but face other challenges such as cognitive impairment or emotional difficulties. Now, of course, all post-stroke outcomes are difficult to navigate. Physical disabilities can be very challenging, while hidden disabilities bring their own challenges, many of which are based around a lack of understanding from other people. And this is an area that we'll be focusing on in our session at 2 o'clock on Thursday this week. Next, we have this, the idea that to regain a specific function, you have a limited time, and that if it doesn't come back within this time frame, perhaps 6 months, perhaps 12 months, it will never return. But we know that this is not always true. Stroke survivors can continue to make progress for many years post-stroke, and their ongoing recovery can last a lifetime. Of course, it's true that many stroke survivors never regain some of their post-stroke function, and that the number of stroke survivors that make a total 100% recovery to where they were pre-stroke is limited. But what is less true is this idea that there is a time limit on certain aspects of recovery. I've had countless conversations with stroke survivors over the years where they've said to me something along the lines of, I was told that I wouldn't be able to get X, Y, Z back, and I've proved them all wrong. But how many conversations have I had with a stroke survivor where they've said to me, well, I was told I should be able to do X, Y, and Z again, but sadly I haven't been able to. I'll tell you, none, not a single conversation along those lines. And another myth about stroke is that all strokes are preventable. Many are, of course. Many strokes are due to lifestyle issues, such as uncontrolled high blood pressure. And yes, age can play a part here, with more strokes occurring later in life. But many strokes occur, especially in younger people, due to an undiagnosed medical condition. Strokes caused by PFOs are a prime example of this, with many people being unaware that they have a hole in the heart until they've actually suffered a stroke. Our role at Different Strokes is to help bust some of these myths and to help stroke survivors and to support stroke survivors to help them to reclaim their lives. As many of you watching will know from personal experience, it can be incredibly difficult for stroke survivors to not only cope with the life-changing nature of a stroke, but to live in a society that still doesn't have a full understanding of what a stroke is, the causes of a stroke, who it affects, and how it affects. Myths lead to a lack of understanding. A lack of understanding can lead to less than adequate support, be that from friends, in a working environment, or society as a whole. So this is why our work at Different Strokes is so important. Now, there are three main strands to what we do here. Delivering services for stroke survivors, raising awareness of younger stroke with healthcare professionals and the general public, and fundraising, which is, of course, vital to ensure that we're financially stable and are able to continue doing our work in the long term. But what's key for us here is not to look at these three elements in isolation, but to understand that they're all interrelated with one another. When we deliver really good services, we want to fully promote these, not only so that more stroke survivors can benefit from what we do, but to raise our profile, which in turn increases awareness of younger stroke. When we undertake work which increases awareness, this can lead to more funds coming into the charity through, for example, being the charity year for organisations or even unsolicited donations. When we support more people, there are more of our beneficiaries who are looking to do fundraising events on our behalf. And when we have more funds, we're able to look at introducing new projects for stroke survivors. The best example of all these strands working together is our annual abseil event. Yes, primarily this is a fundraising event that raises significant funds each year, but it's also a fantastic way for us to promote survivor stories to help raise awareness of our work. And it's also an incredibly empowering event for the survivors that undertake this challenge, which can really help with their long-term recovery. So now to move on and to run you through some of our services and to look at what we've developed over the past 12 to 18 months. Let's start with our exercise sessions. In 2020, as a direct result of the pandemic, we introduced online exercise. Initially, this was done as a kind of replacement for exercise sessions which our local support groups were not able to do as they weren't able to meet at the time. But it soon became clear to us that online exercise was a really, really important thing to do in its own right. And we've therefore continued to run these sessions 5 days a week for getting on for 2.5 years now. And sessions have taken place on a Monday to Friday, starting off on a Monday with sessions for people who might have no movement or heavily restricted movement down one side where all the exercise is seated, and then moving on to more intense sessions on a Friday for people who are close to being able-bodied. And over the last 2.5 years, we've built up a whole bank of exercise sessions, but we're just in the process of looking to do something a little bit different now. So we've actually just started a 12-week course where we'll be showcasing these 12 sessions for each of the 5 levels. And the course will focus on key aspects of exercise: mobility and movement, cardio, strength, and core and flexibility. And we've just started this 12-week course where we'll be releasing videos on a daily basis and continue to do this in the run-up to Christmas until the course is completed. Going forward, we'll then continue to run this 12-week course through our Facebook page, as well as it being permanently available on our YouTube channel. Of course, online exercise in this sense is not the only physical activity that's suitable for stroke survivors. And we're therefore really, really pleased that tomorrow afternoon, Tuesday at 2 o'clock, we'll be running a session with Anna, herself a stroke survivor, who will be delivering a yoga session specifically for stroke survivors. So if you're able to, please do join us for that. With regards to online activity, over the past 18 months, we've been hosting online networking sessions for stroke survivors. This is a chance for stroke survivors to get together and in small groups talk about whichever issues are on their minds and most important to them. We host these sessions every couple of weeks or so, and on different days and at different times to give as many people as possible the opportunity to attend. When we started these, we considered having a specific subject matter for different meetings and having more of a theme to the day. But we actually found out quite quickly that the sessions work best where there's no agenda, where there's nothing decided in advance, and it's quite simply a few stroke survivors having a chat with each other. So if you'd like to give this a try, please do join a future session, and we'll actually be running one of these play sessions at 2 o'clock this Wednesday afternoon as part of this year's conference. A really important part of our work this year has been developing links with ISDNs. ISDN stands for Integrated Stroke Delivery Network. Now, this is a network of 20 regional organisations across England established last year, which are responsible for the delivery of stroke survivors in their local area. Now, it's still relatively early days, and it's true to say that some ISDNs are more advanced than others at this stage, and not everything is yet complete in terms of systems and delivery groups being set up. But what is important about the ISDNs is that emphasis is being placed on having input from stroke survivors and carers. Now, while there's no fixed template for how this is done, in many places this typically involves having an active user voice group that can feed into the decision-making process. Now, in the past, it's felt at times that some organisations have wanted to have a stroke survivor to sit on a board or a working group as merely a tick box exercise. But this, with the ISDNs, now feels very different. And from the conversations that I've had with ISDN managers, there is a very real and genuine desire to ensure that the voice of the stroke survivor is heard loudly and clearly. Because of this, we've recruited a team of volunteer ambassadors, the vast majority of them stroke survivors, to liaise with their local ISDN. And thus far, we've had really good conversations with around 15 of the 20 ISDN areas. This is significant because the importance of having the perspective of younger stroke survivors inputting into decision-making processes cannot be underestimated. And it says positive things about our profile and our reputation that we're able to get involved on this scale. So we very much look forward to continuing this work in 2023 and beyond. Another priority for us is our BAS work. BAS stands for Black and Asian Stroke Survivors. Around 10% of the UK population is of Black or Asian descent. And furthermore, stroke disproportionately affects Black and Asian people and affects them at a younger age. Yet, when we did our beneficiary survey in 2021, it became apparent that only around 4% of our beneficiaries were from these ethnic groups. This is something that we're determined to change to ensure that we're more truly representative of the ethnic diversity of stroke survivors. But it's also something that requires more proactive action above and beyond simply stating that our services are available and accessible to everyone. So initially, we set up a focus group of Black and Asian survivors, a couple of which you can see on the screen here. Carol, who you may remember gave a fantastic speech at last year's virtual conference. Carol's on the left, and Richard on the right, who's also one of our trustees. And the initial work that's been done through this focus group has helped to increase our diversity by a small amount. But we still have a long way to go, and we've therefore recruited a project officer solely to focus on this really important area of our work. Rahal here, you can see in the middle on the screen. She started work with us last month. Rahal had a stroke aged just 22. This work will be a major priority for us in the next 12 months, but I'm not going to go into detail about it now. And instead, I really hope that you can join us at 10 o'clock this Friday morning and hear from Rahal directly about the work she'll be doing in this area. We've continued to raise awareness of younger stroke this year, which has included a number of stories that we've had in the media. A few months ago, we featured the story of Kerry Ann, who continually had her stroke misdiagnosed by members of the medical profession, culminating in one doctor mistaking her stroke for postnatal depression and suggesting that she get her nails done to cheer herself up. This appeared amongst other places in the Sun on Sundays magazine Fabulous and the Daily Mail online. In the Metro, we featured Jim, who had a stroke aged 32 after ignoring the warning signs of high blood pressure. And very recently, we've had lots of courage of Chiara, who runs her own Instagram showing details of one-handed life hacks. We've worked with Chiara for a year or so now and featured her in our newsletter last autumn. And the videos that she makes are really inspiring for other young stroke survivors. And a couple of weeks ago, she appeared on the Newsbeat section of the BBC website. And from there, this was picked up by BBC TV South, where Chiara lives, who featured her in their news bulletin. This then went to BBC Breakfast. And from there, last week, Chiara and I were featured live on BBC Radio 5 Live. Coverage in the media like this is so important because it all helps to raise the profile of different strokes, raise the profile of younger stroke in general, and helps with overcoming some of the myths that I mentioned earlier. It's a great way to continue the conversation about younger stroke, but we must remember that behind all the general statistics I could provide and all the descriptions of the effects of stroke, that at these heart, these are very personal stories about one individual and how a stroke has affected them and their family. They're all unique and all the stories are deeply personal. And we're therefore very grateful when anyone chooses to share their story with us in such a public setting. Very little of what we do and very little of what I discussed today can be done in isolation. To be effective as a stroke support organisation, we rely on working in partnership with many other individuals and organisations. This includes companies which have supported us through Charity of the Year schemes, individuals undertaking fundraising events, charitable trusts and foundations, and donors that have generously provided us with one-off or monthly donations. It involves the exercise instructors we work with, professional experts in specific areas who we seek advice from as required, and many contacts within the NHS. It involves corporate contacts in areas of mutual interests, other charities with similar aims to ourselves, and networks that we're a part of, such as NCVO, the Neurological Alliance, and the Stroke Alliance for Europe. But most of all, it involves our network of stroke survivors. We're proud of the fact that half of our trustees are stroke survivors, more than half of our staff are stroke survivors, the vast majority of our volunteers are stroke survivors. The concept of peer support and survivors supporting survivors runs through all that we do, and we're therefore so grateful to work with this fantastic community. We're always looking for more people to get involved with us, so if you'd like to share your stroke survivor story, nominate us to be Charity of the Year for a company that you work for, get involved with your local ISDN, or support us in any other way, we'd be absolutely delighted to hear from you. In the meantime, though, thank you for all that you do for different strokes and for each other, and I very much hope that you enjoy the whole conference this week.
Thank you very much, Austin. We've had a few questions coming in, and one of them, which I think is repeated a few times, is how can people get involved? What is the best way for them to contact us? And in particularly with the ISDN work that you mentioned.
Well, with regards to the ISDN work, we have been recruiting a team of ambassadors this year. And I would think in the new year, we'll probably be looking to have another training day for more ambassadors as well. But what I would say in the short term is get in touch with us, have a conversation either with myself or my colleague Caroline, who looks after our ISDN volunteers. We can tell you a little bit more about what the role entails and then take it from there. So the best thing I would suggest is if people get in touch with us at info@differentstrokes.co.uk. Lauren, perhaps if you could just pop our email address in the chat box. And then please, we'll just take things from there and have a conversation with you about what you might be interested in.
Perfect. Thanks, Austin. I've just popped that in the chat for people there. Another question we've had, which was submitted before the conference, Are there any statistics for the UK in terms of stroke survival?
The latest statistics I'm aware of, to the best of my knowledge, is that around 1 in 8 individuals who don't have a stroke don't live beyond 30 days. So if you take that first 30 days as an indication of the initial survival rate, then it's approximately 85 to 90%. Again, I don't have the absolute stats to hand, but my belief is around 30 years ago, it was nearer 70 to 75% of people who survived beyond that 30 days. Now, this does strike me that fantastic progress has been made over the last 30 years or so in terms of keeping more people alive. And we're very, very good in this country at being able to, to do that in that initial acute care. What we're not always so good at is issues regarding rehabilitation and ongoing life after stroke. And I think it's really important here that we remember the expression that what we're interested in is life after stroke. Without a shadow of a doubt, existence after stroke, in terms of more people staying alive, has improved very well over the last 30 years. Has life after stroke really improved in terms of the ongoing rehabilitation support people can get? I'm not so sure about that.
Perfect. Thank you, Austin. Another question that's come in live this morning is, I learned about DS via my local stroke association phone call in the early days of my recovery. And do you have a consistent relationship with local stroke association branches so that they can put young stroke survivors in touch with different strokes? My experience is that both charities provide me with very different types of support.
I think that's a really good point, and about having a different kind of support from the Stroke Association and from different strokes, because there are differences that we have within the organisations. Size is a huge difference, the fact that we focus on younger stroke as well. Having said that, we have a very good relationship with the Stroke Association. We're all on the same side, and we all have mutual aims of ensuring that life is better in terms of life after stroke. I think the question mentioned is do we have a consistent relationship on a local level? And possibly not, because there are variations in terms of stroke association services across the country and in terms of different stroke services across the country as well. Some areas we have quite a few local groups, some areas we don't have any. What I would say though is the Stroke Association do have a very active helpline. I've spoken to that helpline team. I've helped to give them information about our different stroke services. And I know that the people on the Stroke Association helpline won't hesitate to refer people to different strokes if they feel that those stroke survivors need the specific support for younger stroke survivors that we can offer here.
That's great, thank you. This question came in ahead of the session, and it says, if there are all signs of stroke apart from facial droop, so perhaps I think other signs of stroke aside from facial droop, why wouldn't they check you for a stroke at A&E?
I'm not a medical professional, but judging from the way that you've described it, if you had many other stroke symptoms and facial droop was the only one that you didn't have, then it is disappointing. And I'm surprised that you weren't checked for that at A&E. On a much wider issue, and I stress this isn't relevant to your specific case at all, but on a much wider issue, what we need to see with the NHS is ensuring that misdiagnosis becomes a thing of the past, and that everyone who has a stroke is being checked as early as possible for their symptoms. But we do also have to be conscious with all the pressures on NHS workforce that it's not necessarily feasible for for every single, individual to be fully checked. If they may have, an occasional one, odd symptom for a stroke or something like that. So there is this balance to be kept here in terms of making sure that all stroke survivors all people that have a stroke, are checked and conscious with the workforce issues that NHS have. One of the things that is happening, though, within the NHS in England, and by the end of the year will be rolled out to approximately a third of England, covering around 20 million of the population, is that the NHS are trialling a video triage system. So this means that if someone, maybe calls an ambulance and the paramedics are there, and those paramedics, who we have to remember are not stroke specialists, and if they're not sure if that individual is having a stroke or not, to look to get a stroke specialist on video ASAP, so that a triage system can then take place to try and then make that diagnosis as accurate as possible, which is of course what we all want.
Thanks, Austin. Now I'm coming up to the last question here, so we've still got time. If you want to submit a question, then please do so. I think I can answer this question in the chat. It says, could a link be sent to me regarding the exercise courses? So I'm going to pop a link in the chat, but everything is on our website as well if you head over to www.differentstrokes.co.uk. So I think that's it for questions at the moment. Austin, are you happy? You done? No more questions coming in? Let's just have a quick check. Yeah, someone has said in the chat, I've contacted Northwest Ambulance to try and get them to adopt Be Fast, but they said that they needed to stick with Fast. I think more is needed in the NHS about adopting Be Fast. There is another comment that's come in. Hello, I'm a community stroke specialist nurse. Please do stress sudden onset of symptoms in A&E if you can. This may help with the issue of more subtle signs of stroke. Yes, we all do want to identify the strokes as promptly as possible. And I think, yeah, that's really understandable. That, everyone would love to diagnose things very quickly, and we hope that that will continue to improve. So I think that draws this session to a close. So that's the first of a very busy week of webinars finished. We hope that you found it insightful, and I want to thank you for coming along on this Monday morning to join us. I want to thank our sponsors, Bolt, Bird & Kemp, and our speaker and CEO, Austin. Later this afternoon at 2 p.m, we have a session on work after stroke with the fantastic Kim Bowler from Michael Page, so one not to be missed. And that's it from us. Have a fantastic day, a fantastic week, and thank you so much for being part of this wonderful, wonderful community. Take care.